I'd like to say thank you also to Leonardo Cohen for the invitation from the center, the director of the center, and also to Pedro Correa that introduced me last year in the center. I'm very happy to be here once again. I changed a little bit the title of my paper with a quotation from a letter. I quote and I come back on it. Erano fra noi, ma non erano dei nostri. They were among us, but they were none of us. And my paper will be divided in 3 parts. And the first part is on the topic of the emotions, about Jesuit. The second one is the question of the sources, and the third one is some examples that I used for my paper. In the variegated panorama of narratives of suffering, Antonio Vieira's well-known phrase, "to be born, a square of heart, to die, the whole world," opens up a whole emotional universe and gestures inescapably towards a human need for understanding of the final sacrifice and the inevitable end of the missionary road. Behind the activities themselves, and within the ceaseless rhythm of evangelization, lurk sentiments and possible alternative perception and interpretation of those activities. The missionary life carries with the vocation, more or less implicitly, the potential for suffering and martyrdom, but the context of such trial will change with time, location, and the person involved. Literal martyrdom is obviously the most extreme outcome of the missionary vocation, but narrative of suffering can also derive from the anguish felt at the dismembering of the or destruction of one's heart, an experience felt all the more acutely when linked with themes of exile, imprisonment, and/or survival in far-off lands. This paper has its origins in a desire to establish whether certain lines of inquiry deriving from the history of the emotions can prove fruitful in the context of the Eastern missions of the Company of Jesus at the time of the destructions of the order in Portugal and its final suppression, the time span of a little over 20 years, which saw the Jesuit missionaries subjected to a series of persecution. The Jesuit missionaries deployed by the company's Portuguese operations, not exactly coterminous with the Portuguese Empire, will experience in fact the expulsion of their missions from Goa and Macau between 1759 and 1762, Portuguese imprisonment, 1762-1777, a further wave of persecution in China between 1768 and 1769, and in 1773 the definitive suppression of the company by Clement XIV. We are talking, therefore, about a sequence of traumatic events studied in recent years from the perspective of exile, but which I aim here to analyze instead from the perspective of the emotions of the protagonist who lived the experience of suppression in contexts different both from the geographical and from the psychological point of view. Historians of the emotions are in agreement on the difficulty, not to say the impossibility, of reconstructing the emotions actually experienced by individual actors in history, and concur on the fact that emotions may be read rather as an expression of corresponding social signals. Many scholars have for this reason concentrated their attention on the contemporary images and iconography as the readiest instruments for highlighting a corpus of emotions understood as a system of relationships. The emotion, that is to say, as a cultural, historical discourse of power in the Susan Grumall formulation, an Australian colleague. This perspective needs to be integrated with Barbara Rosenwein researches which have focused on what she calls emotional communities, reflecting on group emotional dynamics which often, I quote, may coalesce around the memory of a charismatic figure. The Company of Jesus certainly constitutes an appealing field of study for developing this perspective of emotional analysis, particularly at the time of its suppression. In this phase, in fact, The need to preserve the corporate identity of a group, tracing its self-image to a set of principles inspired by the charismatic figure of Ignatius, whose spiritual exercises representing this life foundation for the construction of an introspective identity, seems to put in doubt the sense of self of the individuals that make it up. The basic idea of this paper is therefore to establish the possibility of a reading of Jesuit's emotions in terms of an emotional community, and to assess to what extent such an approach can provide insights not only into their group identity, but also into the reactions provoked by the different contexts in which the missionaries operated. Contexts which, as again Rosenwein has pointed out, often impose or condition an emotive response. I quote again, emotional suffering occurs when people are forced, usually by the prevailing regime, to feel in very restrictive ways. End of quote. Can we specify certain characteristics of the emotional community? Can we specify certain characteristics of the emotional community that repeat themselves over time and space in concomitance with a traumatic event, such as the suppression of an order? To what extent, conversely, do the different geographical contexts in which the missionaries are called on the operating impinge at emotional level? If we must agree with those that oppose any universal or presentist idea of the emotions, the assumption that today's emotions were the emotion of the past and will remain those of the future, deriving exclusively from biological stimuli, it seems to me just as important to underline the necessity of not losing contact with the flesh and blood individual expressing the emotion. What we are dealing with, in truth, are conditioned emotions, and it is precisely on the nature of that conditioning that we will concentrate here. But losing the individual dimension seems to me to risk slipping from the field of the emotion into that of their representations. Obviously, the two worlds are interconnected, and both must be read in the light of the problem of communication, but they should not to be confused. I came to the sources. On the basis of this last consideration, it is obvious that any investigation of this kind presupposes a careful evaluation of the nature of potentially available sources and an equally precise analysis of the modes of production, circulation, and preservation. Sources that bear witness to emotions are likely to be elusive and very varied regarding their typology, the uses to which they have been put, and their survival histories. In these last few years, much has been made on the concept of the ego documents, itself an equally slippery category, but which will surely be of relevance in our choice of sources, that in this case will often be epistolary and therefore safely within its remit. It will not be necessary to dwell here on how correspondence was a favored instrument of communication within the company from its foundation. At the same time, internal letters to another brother or to a provincial father, say, lend themselves to different levels of interpretation that suggest on occasion a desire on the writer's part of reaching a wider readership than merely the addressee, so that an ampler public can be apprised of and understand the suffering of the Jesuit. One must also try to allow for a degree of restraint, both in the sense of self-censorship and, as we shall see, in the censoring of manipulation post factum by the editor of the source. Given this, it is highly probable that letters sent by Jesuits to relatives will provide a particular illuminating contribution. These are, however, difficult sources to track down, because even where they have survived, tracing the relevant archives may be problematic. Other than letters and diaries, to be approached according to their distinct requirements, we have also the series of reports produced more or less contemporaneously by the fathers themselves on the destruction of the Portuguese mission, which need to be taken into consideration. As far as the Jesuit active in the Portuguese charitable missions to India are concerned, we need to further emphasize that the practical nature of their work of evangelization also influences the kind of literary works, the kind of sources available to us. The Indian Jesuits, including those returning to Europe, do not tend to pen literary work. or at any rate documents expressly intended for publication. If we have the access, I come back on it because it's a very different situation for the Brazilian Jesuits who came in Portugal, who produced much narratives, literary narratives. Regarding the Jesuits from the Eastern missions, we should not forget that the difficulty of accessing resources is also due to the very difficult conditions faced by those who set sail from Goa and Macau to Lisbon in the 1761 and 62. This first shipment of 1761 from the East comprised 127 fathers. The following year, another 29 set off from Macau. Conditions on board were particularly grim and took their toll not only on morale but on the physique. Of the 127 from Goa, 24 died on the voyage. On arriving in Lisbon, 16 left the order. A further 26 were imprisoned in São Julião, 16 sent to Azeitão, and 45, the Portuguese nationals, went into exile in Italy. Furthermore, their writings were confiscated and the greater part lost. A number of others besides, as we shall see, died before they could read. The surviving sample is therefore drastically reduced. The work that I'm presenting here has therefore, as must be evident, all the characteristics of a work in progress where the questions are more numerous than the answers. But we come back to the title. They were among us, but not of us. The phrase which I have used as in the title of this paper is taken from a letter from the ex-Indian missionary Gianfranco Filippi to Pietro Licchetta in 1782. Filippi's phrase was the stimulus for an hypothesis on which my speculations are based. It is the esprit de corps which fixes the horizons within which the Jesuits forced to abandon the order, which had given sense to their lives moved, and within which, notwithstanding the dissolution of the company, they will continue to move. The importance of discretion in controlling the passions has been noted in one of the fundamental texts of the Company of Jesus, Nations of Loyola's spiritual exercises. Oddly enough, in the letters we are looking at, Ignatius himself rarely makes an appearance. It is the company as a living body that is the focus of attraction, a company that lives on after its former extinction. Our starting point, then, is the idea of belonging. We go back to Filippi's cited letter. The remark, "they were among us, but not of us," refers to the 16 Jesuits who, overcome by their ordeals and their journey, decide to abandon the order or disembarking in Portugal, and raises the question immediately in terms of an internal and an external space, not least from an emotional viewpoint. Formal membership of the company is not sufficient to make a father one of us. It is no accident that in the letters and reports where mention is made of the defectors, there is a tendency to talk down the numbers and collocate brusquely elsewhere those who abandon the order. We also have a confirmation, a contrario, of such hypothesis from another resume, l'espulsione dei Gesuiti dal Portogallo, regarding the resident Portuguese and not the missionaries, where it is reported that De Carvalho himself attempted to exploit the emotional aspect by convincing the youngest Jesuits, in whom the esprit de corps was assumed to be less strong, to leave the company by seeking the help of their families. It is worth quoting the passage. Okay. Where the documents refers to Pombas's strategy. All their relations came, their friends came, from afar came their mothers and sisters, and some with arguments, some with tears, all alike did their best to persuade them to adapt to the times. The church was at all hours full of women weeping to this effect. Their communities of origin tried to play on their emotions with a view to weakening their sense of belonging to the Jesuit community, without it still succeeding in the attempt, in that the majority of even the younger members choose to remain within the order, and the report observes, I quote again, "many burned the letters from their family without even opening them, imagining what they contain, end quote. The Jesuits had embarked on the Indian missions, I quote, from a holy desire to spread the faith and even to earn a glorious death in the name of Jesus Christ. The idea of martyrdom is always present in the background alongside a strong dose of rituality. But as soon as the news of Pombal decree reaches India and of its actual application throughout the empire, their suffering becomes concrete. The most interesting sources we have for reconstructing the details of the overseas missionaries' exile is undoubtedly a manuscript published largely without notes in 1936 by the Portuguese Jesuit José Caíno, the Exilio Provinciale Transmarino Societatis Jesuit, put together from the oral accounts of the Jesuits banished from their missions and imprisoned in many cases in Lisbon before making the perilous journey to Italy to join their Portuguese brethren who had immigrated in 1759. A text of interest not least then for the matter of its production. Caíno's work, not without its problem but with a strong degree of trustworthiness, contains a mine of information on the Jesuit emotional reactions to the news of their imminent expulsion from the missions. The words that crop up most frequently in the pages dealing with Goa are crudelitas, crudeliter, most cruel, peppering the text alongside with such terms as terror and tears. These refer to physical as much to the psychological events and are to be read with constant reference to the behavior of the political and ecclesiastical authorities, in particular the Augustinians, who kept the Jesuits in Goa, tasked with keeping the Jesuits in condition of semi-imprisonment. Physicality and psychology are closely linked in the revised conception of martyrdom that emerges from the experience of the Jesuit. Caíno reports cases of some aged fathers dying of grief at the thought of having to abandon the mission and consequently their very raison d'etre. Similar instances are recorded by François Bourgeois in China when news of the suppressions reaches Beijing in 1773. The theme of martyrdom reappears often in the documents we have examined. Pietro Licchetta, author of a letter sent in 1780 to the above-mentioned Father Filippi, in this case we have both the letters. On the subject of Father Joseph Pedemonte, who died during the ordeals accompanying his arrest at Goa, writes, I quote, Je sais qu'il était saint avant d'être martyr. Filippi adds its own comment, we were crucified, our lives were set about with crosses and suffering, and our martyrdom continued over many years. Again, in the Compendio dell'Espulsione dei Gesuiti, another manuscript which almost certainly derives from Caíno, the story of Father Sequeira, who died on the voyage from Macau to Goa in 1762, draws on the commonplaces of Jesuit martyrdom, but in this case, the perpetrator is not an idolatrous Indian governor, but a cruel, Portuguese captain. Before expiring, he begged the favor of being buried in the church with the Catholic head there. But the cruel captain would not even concede so much, having the sailors take the corpse out and bury him on the high seas, although the land was nearer, where he could easily have been given an ecclesiastical burial. Furthermore, the same compendium states that the missionaries stationed in Macau, pressed by the Portuguese to reveal the names of other fathers active in more distant provinces, I quote, resolved among themselves to undergo any sanction rather than give up names or identify the provinces in which their missions were operating. End quote. We find confirmation of this attitude in Licchetta's letter. At the time of the arrest, Licchetta was not in Goa, which had left in 1755, but with a mission in Madurai, a territory outside Portuguese political jurisdiction. When the Portuguese subsidies dried up, he and his companions initially thought of returning, but then, I quote, judged it to be more in keeping with the divine will to remain for the succors of these poor Indians and to stick together as one body, end quote. The metaphor of the body had been part of the image world of the Company of Jesus since its beginning and surfaces in many of the letters sent from the Oriental missions, even those of the Jesuits remaining at the Beijing court, in circumstances very different and in many ways protected, but I hope to come back on this in the answer. Lichetta makes much, I quote, of the constant anguish in which the vicissitudes of our persecuted mother, the Company, kept us, and the disastrous news continually arriving of Jesuits banished from various parts of Europe until, I quote, the final blow of the suppression, unquote. This was another occasion of emotional revaluation of one's membership of the Company, and the account Lichetta, Maroon in India, gives us suggests a mixture of sentiments ranging from disappointment at the lost opportunities of converting the Indian population to the fierceness with which he insists on his Jesuit identity. The disappointment is clear in a passage censored from Joseph Bertrand's 19th century edition, where he asks rhetorically, I have baptized some hundreds of souls, converted no, and what I say more or less any missionary from any mission in this peninsula will say it also. But what fruit then do you harvest from your labors? Father Giulio Cesare Potenza, who is now at our mission in Madrid, can answer on my behalf. He refers to that monk in the lives of the fathers, who on the superior service was set to watering the dry grass. This does not prevent him, however, from experiencing the suppression of the order as real degradation. As far as, I quote, the spirit is concerned, I fear and I tremble from head to toe. This is very interesting in Italian because there is a play on words. I tremo e temo. Once again, his state of mind is revealed as much physically and spiritually. I fear and I tremble. The body and the soul as two inescapably connected facets, connected with a remarkable clarity of introspection for a man confined to a remote mission in Madurai at the end of the 18th century. His description of the memory of the news of the suppression is also based above all on his psychological reaction, and the Jesuit treatise, Regole della Modestia, that he was reading at the time. I didn't want to read it or see it, so as not to relieve the suffering and the injury that had been for me so intense and piercing that I had never known the like in my life, or would again, not even whatever may cause my natural death. I thought I would not survive the answer. I neither ate nor slept, unless exhausted and cast down by an extraordinary sadness, and such snatches of sleep would always be interrupted and waking in spite of myself. The first thought that would come into my mind, like the cruelest knife thrust penetrating my heart, was this. The company is destroyed. I am no longer a Jesuit, and this left me quite stunned and besides myself. I have another quotation here from François Bourjas, that was the head of the Jesuit community in Beijing. What I'm writing seems a dream, our dear, our holy company that is no more. The Lord be praised, they will be done. I will suffer cruelly, but with God's mercy, I want to accept with all my heart. I will embrace with love this terrible cross. This intimate intermingling of body and sight, we find unsurprisingly even more forcibly expressed in the letters from the non-Portuguese missionaries, who, on arriving in Lisbon, were arrested on Pombal's instruction and confined in the fortress of São Julião. Because when the Portuguese arrived in Lisbon, they came directly in Italy, and the strangers are in prison in Lisbon. This prison is described by all as a, I quote, a deep cavern, or rather some ancient sepulchre, in which, Filippi writes, our regular diet was the bread of sorrow and the water of tears. Once again, psychological assault are displaced onto the body via a deadly hypochondria and exaggerated sickness, all but inevitable concomitants of an ultra-violent tenor of life, utterly alien to humanity and educational pursuit. It was as if, as CEHR, another Jesuit writes, we were moving from purgatory to hell. Despondency was the prevalent emotion, and it is again Filippi who recalls, I quote, buried alive in that dark and horrible sepulchre, with water dripping everywhere. I must confess my weakness. I found myself oppressed by a profound melancholy and then ambushed by terrible fears. But as Jesus Christ, as solutio omnium difficultatum, took him as the inseparable companion of my suffering, I turned. In this context, being deprived of the sacraments was seen as an untainted trial inflicted on the fathers. The letters then oscillate between an emotional framework within which the suffering of the individual emerges with maximum force. Another quote, for all that we were resigned, we were known of less weak and fragile men, and put nothing from our own strength, but at constant need for the highest trial. And the overarching scaffolding of belonging to the Church of God and the company. These two, however, find expression in emotional terms. Thus, the persecution could be interpreted through the filter of an underlying serenity deriving from the knowledge that their own sufferings were light compared with those endured by Christ himself, and, I quote again by the Bohemian father Abril, so many selfless martyrs for the faith, owing to which I am ashamed to suffer so little for my God, since for the love of the Lord one must be in readiness for all things, if needs be at the cost of one's life. In the context of our theme, there is an interesting gloss of the communication of the suppression of the company to those who were in prison in 1773. Confronted by the tears and sighs of the prisoners for the extinction of their mother, those informing them of the fact would have it the fathers, rather than weeping, rejoiced that this was the express will of the Portuguese sovereign. Filippi comments apropos. What barbarity! After forcing what was left of our bodies into an iron servitude, they sought then to overrule the most righteous and innocent attachments of our souls. This seems to me a key passage in that it brings us back to that disciplining not only of the body but also of the souls, which, in the view of many historians, represents one of the principal features of the ancient regime society. Finding himself on the receiving end, it is as if all of a sudden Filippi wakes up to the inhumanity of seeking to indoctrinate hearts, a barbarous hitherto synonymous with the confessional churches, only now being perpetrated by the civil power. When talking of the emotions, as we said at the outset, we cannot exclude the power relations under the aegis of which such emotions are developed. Nonetheless, notwithstanding the imbalance of power, the term joys is frequently voiced in the letters. I emphasize voices because there is still much to be said on the relation between the expressed and the actual lived. We must not forget the possible public dimension of some of these documents, given the wide circulation their authors may have aspired to. In this sense, the recurrence of the word hope in relation to a renaissance of the company of Jesus, while also giving us an indication of the persistence of an esprit de corps among many of the persecuted Jesuits, also testifies to an awareness of the fathers, part of being engaged in a political struggle. The theme of the ever-living company of Jesus is one that we find equally among those surviving in the reduced missionary context, such as Viqueta, and the privileged missionaries still active at the imperial court in Beijing, as well as those enduring the extreme persecutions of exile and imprisonment. So, concluding, as we emphasized at the outset, this project should be seen as an open laboratory whose object is to examine the phenomenon of the emotions in a wider framework of the history of the company of Jesus, with particular reference to the causes, the implementation, and the consequences of the suppression, an event clearly highly provocative of emotions. Such conclusions as can be drawn in the light of the potentially available sources are double-faceted, political, public, and private. Even if, from the examples examined, one can really appreciate the complexity of analyzing distinctly these two emotional worlds, which would appear in fact to feed off and into one another. Thank you.